He didn't dare look at what was coming next. There was the station master's house. The station master was about to have breakfast. "Horrors!" cried Thomas, and shut his eyes. The house rocked, broken glass tinkled, plaster was everywhere. Thomas had collected a bush on his travels. He peered into the room through its leaves. He couldn't speak.
When Christopher Awdry was asked what were some of his favorite stories written by his father, he said that one of them was Thomas Comes to Breakfast, and I certainly agree with him. I believe it's a classic example of the tank engine's character, who becomes conceited after being praised by his driver and thinks he can move by himself, only to end up face-planting to the station master's house, spoiling his family's breakfast. Although, perhaps, he may have been taking notes from an engine on his old line, the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway. Our story's protagonist was 166 Cliftonville, an E3062 tank engine. One evening at New Cross Shed, the washout gang had finished cleaning the engine. But, upon refilling the boiler, they forgot to close the regulator fully, and the reverser was kept in forward gear. This went unnoticed by the firelighter, who began raising steam. The boiler pressure gradually rose, and with Cliftonville's handbrake being left off, she quietly slipped away from the shed. Although railway staff saw her proceeding down the yard, they thought she was being moved by the shed driver and took no notice. She kept rolling along, under the yard hoist, towards the end of the siding, which had no buffer stops. Beyond that was a fence and a house, owned by the New Cross station master. Cliftonville left the rails, plowed through the fence, and crashed into the parlor room of the station master's home.
The station master was furious.
Get the fuck out of here!
Her visit was brief, however, as the wall of the house was propped up, and she was removed from her resting spot. Years later, Curly Lawrence, a former railwayman, wrote Cliftonville's story as part of Recollections of the LB and SCR in the Bluebell Railway news magazines from the early 1960s. Shortly after, he received a letter from the railway on behalf of Wilbert Awdry himself.
I am particularly delighted with LBSC's recollections. I hope that neither he nor you will mind, but I have snaffled one, which, suitably adapted, will appear in my next Thomas book. The local Willie paid a call at the station master's house.
Lawrence replied back, "It is quite okay for me for His Reverence to seek my recollection of old Cliftonville's uninvited call on the station master for use in his book. In fact, he can make what use he likes of any of them, as far as I'm concerned. Glad he finds them interesting." That Thomas book would become the 16th volume in the series, titled Branchline Engines, and was published in 1961.
"You miserable engine," she scolded. "Just look what you've done to our breakfast. Now I shall have to cook some more." She banged the door. More plaster fell. This time it fell on Thomas. Thomas felt depressed.